All right. Hey, thanks everyone. Last session of the day. So I think we put together a good panel here of all of our committers. What we're going to do is we've got a little bit of prepared stuff. We asked our committers a bunch of questions. And then we've got a little bit of time for free-form questions, which we'll use these two mics. Just want to thank everybody again for showing up and contributing. I'm sure you're all tired, and I know these guys are tired, and I know I'm tired. But let's finish strong here with a good session and some discussions around what's coming next. So with that, I'm just going to start naming names here, and hopefully I get everybody right as we go. In terms of inviting them onto the stage. So I'm just thinking I'm going to start over here, except for Steve, I want you to come last. So I'm just going to call up our committers one by one, save your applause for the end, and then we'll get started by handing it off. So Joel, you're come on up. Joel Bernstein, just late to the party. Yep, pick your seat. Ansham, we'll do this real quick. Ansham Gupta works for IBM. Joel's at El Fresco. Eric Erickson, I don't know the name of your company, but independent consultant extraordinaire. Cassandra Target, Lucidworks, she always says, hey Grant, why don't you say a lot of nice things about me? So Cassandra, I couldn't do my job without Cassandra. She does a lot of great work for us, herding the committer cats that work at Lucidworks. So very thankful to her. Noble Paul from Lucidworks as well. Tim Potter, David Smiley, let's keep them rolling. Tomas, are you coming up or not? You want to come up, come on. Varun Thacker, come on, Tomas. Alan Woodward from Flax. Upai Vyara, hopefully I said that right. Upai said I could just call him the person whose name you cannot pronounce. Yannick Celia, obviously everybody knows Yannick is the founder of Solar. Mark Miller, one of the key guys behind Solar Cloud and at Cloudera. Eric Katcher, one of my co-founders here at Lucidworks. Toke, I'm not going to try your last name, Toki. How do you say it? You coming up or no?
Well, I'm not a committer.
I thought you were. See, I knew I should have gone off the list. All right. And Christina, you were late coming on. Are you coming up? You're a committer? Come on. All right. On Rama too. See, I should have, Aaliyah, I should have gotten the list. I'm sorry, Ram. My bad. I apologize. Chris Hostetter, everybody knows him. Where were you a minute ago? Chris Hostetter. Who else am I missing? Where's Mikhail? Is Mikhail coming? All right, we're running out of chairs. That's fine. Last but not least, the person who's going to moderate this session, Steve Rowe, also from Lucidworks. So big round of applause to the team here.
All right. Thanks, Grant. All right, like Grant said, I'm Steve Rowe. I work at Lucidworks. The structure is Lucidworks sent out a survey to committers about a month ago and asked them about, what's going on in the project. These are the questions that were sent out. What are the coolest new features in the past year? Big changes in the next couple of years? And what sort of feedback or contribution can community members, such as yourselves, do to further the goals of the project? So we're going to go through those answers. I've sort of grouped them by theme. People who are interested in them are going to comment on them briefly because we have like 20 minutes to go through questions, or rather to go through the survey results. And then after that, hopefully about 15 minutes for questions from the audience. And we'll have you come up to those microphones in the middle of the floor here. But please hold questions until that point. Let's see. There we go. So to remind you of the landscape for talking about features that have come in the last year, roughly a year ago, 4.10 was released. And we've had 1 major, 4 minor, and 6-point releases in that time. So this is one of 3 word clouds I made from the sort of jammed together responses I got from all of the committers. As you can see, faceting was the largest response grouping, followed by streaming, APIs, pivots, SQL. You can see a few other things, buzzwords. And to get started, grouping together responses. If you see here, these are lightly edited responses from each of the committers and who said what they said. So for faceting, we have Shalin, who's not with us today, said that distributed, pardon?
He's not dead.
He's not dead. Thank you. Thank you, Haas. Sorry, Shalin couldn't be with us here. That's right, yeah. Stuff you can do with pivots, that is stats, facet ranges, facet queries. Tomas gave that answer. Varun said the JSON facet API, and David said heat map faceting. So the plan is to spend just a couple of minutes on each slide. We don't have enough time to go over each one of these. So what I'm hoping is that one of you guys is passionate enough about one of these things that you can give a nutshell description in a minute or so. And I'm going to be asking for volunteers. And if failing that, I'm going to, pigeonhole you and say you're doing it. So, okay. So let's see. Pivot faceting. Haas, where's Haas? Yes. So you know about pivot faceting.
I
Tell
didn't
us.
answer this question on purpose. What about it?
Anything.
It's
Maybe if
pretty
you
cool.
could describe it and let everybody know what it does.
Yeah. So pivot faceting is basically like it's what some people call hierarchical faceting. A better way to think of it is facets within facets within facets. So an example might be I want to pivot facet on category and then manufacturer. So in one request, you can say, what are the top 10 categories? And for each of those categories, what are the top 10 manufacturers? That's my classic e-commerce example. So that's pivot faceting. And then distributed pivot faceting is hard. So we added that. And then the second part is, once you've done that, what are the top 10 categories for my search? And of each of those, what are the top 10 manufacturers? Nesting stats and ranges under that is like saying, okay, well, now that I know for this category and this manufacturer that that's where most of my search results are, what is the average price of the products in that category and in that manufacturer? Or I want to do range faceting on price within that. That's what the first two are. So is that good? Am I off the hook now?
Good.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
You may leave the stage. No.
Next large group was about streaming in SQL. So Varun, Otis, Grant, Eric, all brought up interesting new features that were put in place. Some of these things I don't think have actually been released, so we'll talk about them anyway. Joel? Where's Joel? So you just gave a huge talk about this. Right. So in 10 seconds, tell us what your talk said.
So in 10 seconds, you can now do parallel SQL queries across Solar Cloud collections. And that's in trunk. It's going to come out in 6. It uses a parallel computing framework for it. It connects all kinds of different Solar features like facets and other things to it as well. So yeah, no, it's a big topic. You say that the primary motivation for it? Primary motivation was to put have an optimizer that sits in the middle of Solar, and you give it a query, and it picks the best path, so you don't have to think about what Solar feature you're going to use to satisfy your query. So basically turn it into a simpler system to use.
I think, Joel, some of this stuff, it only works over doc values. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's pieces of it that are the shuffling pieces of it that are implemented, shuffle with over doc value fields, and then there are pieces where you push down the aggregations using facets, and those will work out of the box with any Solar implementation.
Cool.
So it's nice. So out of the box, you can run it. You just can't necessarily run the shuffling pieces.
So this is any of this stuff released at this point? It's all in 6?
There are various pieces that are in 5, but the error handling is terrible, as Haas had pointed out to me. And so,
Thank you, Haas.
so 6 has great error handling. So I would go from trunk rather than try to wrestle with the errors coming out of 5.
Okay. Thanks, Joel.
You're welcome.
I using the word singles to mean uncategorized. So Tim says security, coolest new feature. Varun says replica placement strategy. Eric and Ansham both said ease of use API and bin scripts. And Ansham says the stance component. So Ansham, your name is mentioned twice. Where are you? There you are. Pick any one of those and talk about it. How's that?
Yeah, that would take 10 seconds, but okay. I'd say ease of use in bin scripts has been pretty awesome over the last 1 year or so, probably 2, I'd say. Just being able to take Solar out of the box and being able to index documents in like 5 minutes and see data coming out of it is pretty awesome, all the stuff that's happened. Yeah, so it just lets you, as a new user, spend less time in knowing or understanding what Solar can do for you to begin with. So it's pretty awesome in that ways for new users. And for older users, just the option of, not option, but being able to use APIs instead of manually, let's say, uploading configs or changing schema and then re-uploading configs or schema. That's pretty awesome as well. So it just makes things way more easier.
So, Tim, you did most of the grunt work on the bin scripts. You want to say what those are and why they're important?
Hello? Okay. Sure. So I had hair like nobles before I started on the Windows bin script. No. So, as sort of Ansham said, about just before 5, we kind of took on this idea of java-jar, start.jar, right? Made sense at the time, but there were just a lot of things everybody was doing, just it wasn't in the actual product, right? Like I had probably written 10 versions of Solar Start bash scripts and things. So we just started to build that in, and then it became sort of obvious that, it was cool. Haas pointed out, he's like, well, shouldn't we also have like init scripts? And if you can do that, you might as well just like have an install script, install it as a service, and all of those sorts of things. So all of that's kind of over the last year. I was surprised because my bash foo was pretty weak, but for the most part, this again, love about open source is that where there were issues, I mean, the overall structure was a little complex, and we're working to make that cleaner and things like that. But for the most part, it's really helped people get going quickly. I would say looking a little bit down the road, and I know that's another slide, but next thing I want to tackle is like Solar as a Windows service. And there are projects out there that do a good job at doing that. So I think, there's still more work to do on the bin scripts, but it's a pretty good foundation. And, they can always be improved and things like that. But for now, I think, for the most part, now at least we have something, a place in the product that gets tested that we can, now start to improve and add best practices. And, there's been a lot of talk at this conference about using G1. And so there's no reason that Solar can't detect your Java version and switch on G1 flags if you're, using the right version of Java 8 and things like that. So that's where I think we'll start to go in the future is just adding more and more best practices to those bin scripts.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. So moving on to the next topic, which is pivoting to what committers think will be new features upcoming in the next couple of years. As you can see, analytics here is far and away expected to be the biggest deal, followed by APIs and Solar Cloud, of course. So lacking a better data, or lacking a better way to describe this group. I just said doing more with data, but making your data work for you. I don't know. Anyway, let's see. We have analytics, and there are, 7 people. Ansham, Noble, Eric, Ram, Otis, Grant, and Varun said that's going to be really important. SQL-like interface. We already went over that from Joel. Grant says machine learning and NLP tie-ins. Any one of you 7 guys want to talk about analytics? Ansham, Noble, Eric, Otis, Grant?
Yeah, the quick thing for me about analytics is that given some of the work, especially that Joel's been doing, we can now process hundreds of millions of rows out of solar in a way that we could not before. And so from my perspective, we can perform long-running operations that are much shorter running than they used to be on massive data sets, massive result sets, especially out of solar, allowing solar to be used as an analytics engine in ways that it really hasn't been before. We frankly don't know where that's going. I think it's going to be pretty exciting, but I suspect that the use cases are going to start popping up that push the limits of that and expand it just, as you were saying, like open source does, right? Somebody has a use case and we'll make it do that.
Thanks, Eric. There's a large grouping, I'm going to have 2 slides on it, about sort of how solar gets deployed. So Grant mentioned rack awareness. Ram said more instance roles and intelligence with elasticity and streamlined metric support. Haas refers to smart cluster management based on size, load, and machine health. So essentially, this grouping is about having software, for example, like supervisor software that can, without having to have manual intervention, react and dynamically position the cluster. Ram, you're mentioned several times. You want to field this one?
I guess the general theme is that solar is starting to get used in bigger and bigger use cases. I think there was a lot of effort put on in the last year or 2 years on, for example, being able to scale to thousands of collections or even more. I see that as a continuing theme as sort of bigger and bigger organizations start treating solar as a really viable alternative. You're going to end up you're going to find that solar is sort of improving a lot of these things where it's not just about the core functionality, but how stable it is and how much can you give flexibility. And I think that can be a huge USP for solar, the way in which it provides flexibility to the user in terms of, for example, instance roles. Like, I think Noble added some time back on how overseer can become a role. Is it Noble? Was it you? The overseer being a new role, yes. So in a similar way, right, having more distinction between different nodes of your cluster doing different things and being able to scale independently. Similarly, sort of like I think there's ongoing work now on being able to use variety of criteria to decide how new replicas or new shards are being added. I think bigger and bigger setups want a place where they can just add more machine and expect solar to work. And I think that will be the direction which will go.
Cool. So some more issues around deployment. Noble, Ansham, and Grant all said scalability. Shalin and Noble talked about resilience and stability. Shalin says robust multi-tenancy. At this point, multi-tenant solution is not cloudware. Haas and Shalin mentioned the ability to work across multiple data centers. Eric talked about how solar will move toward, instead of shipping the kitchen sink as it does now, having a bare bones and then utilities. He said to install third-party plugins, but I assume he means also the ability to install plugins that are now shipped as part of solar. And Varun says, and I should say that this is probably somewhat controversial, that solar cloud becomes the only way to run solar. So let's see, what can we pick? Eric, why don't you talk about breaking up solar and making it pluggable as it's shipped?
Okay. That's really kind of the stuff Noble's working on is the blob store and being able to use, being able to inject jar files in there and use ClassPass from there. So plugins such as query parsers and so on can be pulled from basically a secure class path effectively and be able to install that. So we've seen that with the basic configs that we have in there now, where it's bare bones, and to do anything with it, you have to go in there and adjust the configuration. We're going to be able to control solar from the outside and fire up just solar and then add things to it through the API effectively, instead of having to go in and adjust XML config files.
Cool. And uncategorized things. Several people mentioned an initiative that Tim and Noble have worked on so far, but Ram and Otis also are mentioning this, modern self-describing APIs. Ansham and Shalan mentioned easy Cloudware admin UI. Tim thinks that we're going to have more features that have to do with better memory management, that is off-heap and efficient caching and other data structures. And Ram mentioned enforcing security. Upayavira, would you mind talking about the admin UI, where it is now, where it's going?
Yes, so over the last, since December, can't work out how many months that was, I've been reworking the admin UI to use AngularJS, the aim being to make it more easily extensible. So we should see in 5.4, we should see, if you're in Solar Cloud mode, instead of seeing a core admin tab, which allows you to go in and destroy things by getting it all wrong, which is just the natural way it tends to behave, you'll see a collections tab, which allows you to just see, it's I've been using it for my talk and a few other things, and it's just a bit strange. You just click Add Collection, type in a name, choose a config set, and click Go. And it worked. This is just too easy. And it's just delightful because Solar has so many well-thought-out APIs, but using APIs themselves is, it's not quite, you've got to read the documentation and things like that. So actually building UIs on top of these APIs is really quite straightforward and makes them so much more accessible. So I think we can expect to see the UI growing. We should see the ability to add and remove fields and things like that, and hopefully in 5.4 as well. More substantial querying. So instead of having a queue box that allows you you have to type in the query, you have to know what you're typing. Could we help you do that? Could we help you understand what the output is that you're seeing, and so on? So I'm hoping we'll see a lot more features that make Solar easy to understand if you don't know what's going on underneath, so that it can lead you to understanding what's going on underneath.
Thanks, Upayavira. And the final category, help from the audience. So I'll have a few slides where people have requested input, contribution, that sort of thing. The main focus of these was APIs, as you can see, Solar Cloud UI. So Varun, Tim, and Noble talked about APIs, and Noble, can you talk about what that effort's about and what sort of help you want?
So Solar started with very simple HTTP GET for everything. Like you can do GET or POST or whatever you want, and every operation was just everyone felt like it, just did it, and over time other softwares evolved, and we look like kind of very old. The problem is when Upayavira is trying to build a UI, he has to just go to the reference guide and probably build the UI. What we need is something where the APIs will tell hey, this is what we expect, and this is the output that you can expect. So basically, if you are writing tools, there are external tools which can discover the APIs, then say validate your input, before you even fire the query and help you parse the output by say, this is going to come out from that. So basically just expect this instead of, you have to go and insert data and fire queries and all those stuff. So basically it's going to enable people like Opera just to automate the whole creation of APIs, and just when a new API comes up, it should be automatically be available in the admin UI and everywhere else. So we want Solar APIs to be discoverable and it's self-describing, and you don't really need to go to say a separate reference guide probably to understand what the API does. And that should be true for everything. As Eric said, like we'll start off Solar just bare bones, like you would start up a normal database or something, and you don't touch schema, you don't touch config. You just start up a plain Solar where whatever you want. You should not have 10 different styles of Solar. You just start up bare bones Solar. You just run APIs to manage everything, configuration, schema, whatever you want. So that's the direction we want to go. Like a normal database, it should be like simple, okay? Yeah, that's pretty much the plan.
So can you say what sort of input you want?
Pardon?
What sort of input do we want from the community?
Yeah, so the input I want is like, that I have opened ticket, I don't remember the ticket number, but yeah, the ticket to modernize the APIs. So what I want is like, people to say like, oh, these are the APIs. I'm sure that API is one thing what users care about. So instead of me going and telling like, okay, this is what is going to be the Definitely UI API, please come and contribute in the ticket and say that, hey, this is the direction we can take. For instance, we desperately need something like the query DSL to there is nobody has actually probably worked on that. We really need a query DSL which can be the V2 of querying instead of having simple key value for queries, which is highly ineffective. So anybody who can contribute those syntaxes are more welcome. Other things are simple, but DSL is not there.
I think too, at the meta level of the APIs, it's really key for us as a group to all start to agree on a consistent approach to producing APIs and making sure, so I think a lot of this work is about that kind of stuff too. So as we add new features, functionality, users aren't saying, oh, well, over here I'm doing local params and all that, over here I'm doing JSON, over here I'm doing this. And so having a much more consistent user experience around APIs, I think, is really important for the growth and the learning and adoption of Solar. So I think that's where a lot of this work is pushing towards too.
In case anyone is interested, the Jira is Solar 8029.
Thanks, Noble. Thanks, Ram. We're running out of time here, so I've listed everything that people requested, but I think we're going to skip over some of this. Eric, do you want to talk about this? If not, we'll skip over and go to more things. Okay. Ansham says the security framework, Solar Cloud scalability, and use Solar Cloud and help us make it better. Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if it's going to show up here, but the new UI, the Angular UI, will be, in 5.4, there will be a link saying new UI. Please, when you start using 5.4 and you go to the admin UI, click on that before you do anything else. Yeah? Because it needs testing. Yep. So if you find that there inevitably will be bugs in it, there will be annoying things that don't behave how you expect, try it, use it, file a bug and go back to the old one. That way, we can get this thing really stable. Once it's really stable, we make it default, and we start adding loads of cool features that we all benefit from. So that's a very clear way that probably everyone in this audience can help in making that more stable and ready to expand and grow.
And there it is.
Thank you.
Eric says we also need help with streaming aggregation and parallel SQL. So that hasn't, the big parts of that haven't been released yet. So Joel in his talk made a bid for people to test that out on Trunk and
Yeah, so you can test it out in Trunk. Also, there's going to be a lot of documentation that gets developed for it. So if you want to look at it now, you really have to look at JIRAs and test cases to get going. But in the next couple of weeks, documentation is pretty much my highest priority so other people can participate.
And we made it through all of those things, and now we'd like to move into the portion where we ask for questions from the audience. And I don't think we have any pre-set up, so if you have a question you'd like to ask about the project, just come forward and talk on the mic, please.
What is timeline for Solar 6?
Timeline for Solar 6.
You want Joel's opinion, or do you want somebody else's opinion?
I mean, I think essentially it's when someone decides it needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, we have parallel lines of development, right? So there's 5X and there's Trunk. And if you use 4X and Trunk back when 5 came out, the model was once there are enough features in Trunk that there's demand for that can't be backported, it's time to release. That is the model. It is not a time frame. It is not a schedule. It is a what's the word I'm looking for? A tidal wave of demand for the features. Because if the features can be backported easily, they will be backported easily, and then we don't need to release 6. Like 6 months ago, someone asked the question, when will 6 be released? And the answer was, why do you care? There's literally not a single feature on Trunk that isn't on 5X. So it was like, no, we're not going to release 6 just for the fuck of it. There's got to be a reason. We now have some features on Trunk that don't exist on 5X because they are hard to backport. As we get more of those, there will be a reason and a demand to do it. Right now, it's there's only a couple. They are important features, they are cool features, but there's only a couple. I do believe there is one blocker to releasing 6 at this point, which is the indexable field, storable field shit, right? So it's like there's an ugly little bit there, but it's kind of ugly just because there hasn't been enough demand for 6 for anyone to be like, okay, we really have to fucking fix this.
That was a blocker for 5 as well. We just punted.
Yeah, it was a blocker for 5 that we punted, so now we can't punt it anymore. We might punt it, but anyway, so. But the short answer is there is no time frame, there is just demand. So the more there is demand for the features on 6, the more that gets into 6 that can't be backported, then there will be a reason.
So the takeaway is get out there and scream for 6. I mean, that'll bring pressure to it, right?
Yeah, not quite
Yeah,
yet.
the one reason why we would want to have 6 is because we need Java 8 to be the default, and stuff in Jetty 9 that we need, most likely, Shalin has been pushing for it, will need Java 8. If I think the community has been pushing for, say like, hey, we can't change the default Java version or from 7 to 8 in a minor version. So that could be one trigger for moving to 6 because we need Java 8 features.
Okay, another question? Please.
As for the breakdown of roles in the new solar cloud development, what is the visibility right now on what kind of roles a solar cloud instance can take? How far do you guys plan on taking it, or how high level do you guys plan on keeping it this time?
Roles, okay.
I think we had trouble hearing that. Could you come closer to the mic and reiterate?
Yeah, so with the new solar cloud development where each instance can have a particular role, how deep down have you defined those roles yet, and how much visibility do you have in what roles a solar cloud instance can take?
Yep, so as of now, the only role I know of is overseer. That's the only special node that we have in the solar cloud. So going forward, probably when you have this long-running process coming up, I can say that dedicate these replicas for back-end processing only. Okay, so I don't know if you can come up with more examples, but as we have different kind of tasks coming up, we can have roles. Okay, so for now, as of now, we don't have a lot of places where we use this long-running process. When this Spark stuff and all is being used a lot, we would want these things will be handling live queries, so you don't want to tax them a lot. So that's one of those use cases. Beyond that, I am not aware of any.
Yeah, I think when I mentioned roles, it's something I see coming more in the future. As Noble mentioned, it's just overseer currently. But yeah, I mean, like you could sort of like see certain machines alone sort of being preferred for shard leadership, for example, so that they, if due to some reason, there are not many use cases, but if someone might need the flexibility of saying that I want to prefer these machines to index first. So that's one example. You might want certain shards or certain replicas to only do search, only do indexing but not search. So they could be cold replicas, for example. So these are some examples of things which could come up. We don't have this functionality as yet, but these are some of the things I see coming up.
All right, so we probably have time for about 2 more questions. If you can come up to the mic and sort of make a queue of 2, and then we can go through more. So please, just come up.
Data import handler, people are still using it. Any attention to that? Any plans to replace? You know, what's its future kind of thing, apart from where it is now?
Thanks, Alexander.
What was the question?
Data import handler.
Noble wrote it. No. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I think there's an open JIRA for it, is to get the data import handler, and it's a very pragmatic kind of thing to use. And while we may all kind of curse at it at times, it gets the job done when you know how to tinker with it. And one of the JIRAs that we have open, I think now, is to migrate the data import handler so it could be run client side, so that we could roll it into a command line tool that could be configured to push content in that way. So then you could run it on different nodes and so on. I don't know what Noble thinks of that one.
Die in a fire? I mean, my personal view is that stuff belongs elsewhere.
Yeah, it's like the solar cell stuff, ETL, document transformation. Like, we don't really want to roll it into the solar process if you're doing something big and at production at scale. It's like that stuff is great for like getting started and trying things, but when you really need to scale, you want to do that stuff on other nodes, I think.
And my personal view too is that all of the analyzers should be upstream from solar, and all you send in is pre-tokenized packed streams. But there's debate on that.
So if you look at data import handler, so that is like, it runs on a single process, okay? So when you move to Solar Cloud as the de facto way of deploying solar, that model of importing data does not really fly. So we want it to be now for instance, Tim's example of the Spark to index data, like you have 10 processes fetching data parallelly and hitting directly at the respective leaders of the shards. That's kind of a scalable model of indexing, okay? But this is like single thread, single process for a cloud system. That is not really 2015.
It's going into the bit bucket.
All right, I think we're about out of time here. Thanks for all your questions. I wish we had more time, but I'm going to give it over to Grant here, and he's going to have some closing remarks.
Yeah, let's give these guys a big round of applause. Feel free to leave if you want. You don't have to stay up here.